Good gracious! Hello there! I didn't know you were coming. Please, come in. Take off your fedora. Put your whip on the table. Take off your boots. Have a glass of hot chocolate. And sit down and enjoy this Chapter 11 of Michael Stackpole's I, Jedi. That evening, after dinner, I found myself thinking about what Luke had said. The idea that I had to first feel the Force before I could employ it made me reevaluate what I had learned so far. Luke had also said that prior to what we tried earlier, we had only been using the Force passively, to enhance our senses. This made me wonder if I had been tapping the reservoir of Force energy that my body produced. It occurred to me that each living creature generated enough of the Force to keep them aware of it and in touch with the world, but to push beyond that required an expanded flow of energy. It required tapping into the Force itself. Luke said that I had to believe, but that meant letting go of doubts. This brought me back to the realization that my doubts were part and parcel of who I was, and unless or until I could push beyond them, I would be blocked from access to the Force. I felt as if I had to sacrifice myself to be able to feel the Force and use it, and yet I did not want to do that. Still, my little chamber had reeked of sacrifice. The names sunk in the stone made it crystal clear. Porkins and Biggs had died at Yavin, sacrificing all they were and ever could be. Wedge's life had been sacrificed to the rebellion, his dreams deferred, his access to a life others would consider normal denied. And if I included Luke in the group, he was left with a mission to recreate an order of peacekeepers that his father had destroyed, to be able to rebuild a galaxy his father had helped take apart. Suddenly, my room became cloying and close. Here, 3 men had vowed to put an end to the Empire, or die, knowing less about their probable futures than I did about mine, having lived less of a life than I had lived. They made their choice. And a similar choice was asked of me. And my choice was easier, since all I needed to let go of were my preconceptions and prejudices, not my flesh and blood and brains and life. I have to stop thinking and feel. I have to let go. I sighed aloud. Maybe Ayala was right. Maybe Coruscant's sun will go nova before I can do that. I fled my room and quickly found myself in the turbo lift to the rooftop. Our moon was slipping behind the gas giant and had turned its face away from it, so we were entering true night, not just twilight night. I expected it to be cold and got a good chill blast of air when the lift door opened. I reveled in the way the breeze sucked warmth from me and hoped my thoughts could be as cold as my flesh. I knew my fear of change was silly. Intellectually, I could see my transition as that of an insect, moving from one life stage to another. The creature was the same, and had the same genetic code, but moved into a phase that gave it greater abilities. In my case, the greater responsibilities would bring with them greater responsibilities. I didn't think I was afraid of them, but in the questioning mood I was in, I wasn't sure of anything about myself. I began a slow circuit around the temple squared off top, and saw a figure sitting on the northeast corner. I tried to reach my senses out to see who it was, but they never got very far. He turned to face me, letting the wind tease his fluffy beard, then turned back to look out over the forest and at the black blanket of sky in which billions of stars nested. I approached him, but hung back several paces to give him space. I didn't think anyone else would be up here, Streen. The old man shrugged. I'm so used to being alone that I can only stand so much in the way of company. I'll leave you then. No need. Those shadows hid his face as he turned toward me again. I felt an intensity radiating out from his invisible eyes. You hold yourself in tightly enough that your presence is not painful. Thanks, I think. Forgive me. My personal relation skills are not what they should be. He smiled as the undulating cry of hunting Cinterills seemed to mock him. For years, my only companions were Bestman Rawiwiks, large black scavengers with leathery wings. They have a rudimentary intelligence. Never taught one a useful trick, but they would come when I had food to feed them. I smiled and sat down on the cold stone. I've had friends I couldn't say as much about. Gas prospecting on Bestman was lonely work, but I didn't mind. The old man tapped his head with a finger. Kept hearing voices in my head, feeling people's moods. Only by getting away could I shut them out. Now Master Luke's training is helping me do that consciously. Don't miss it. Puts mystery back into life. I shot him a bemused smile. Mystery? Yeah, like you, for example. Me? You're very closed, but bits leak out. Pride's hot enough to melt Durasteel. Streen shrugged. And pain. Sense of judgment cuts like a lightsaber. Really? My expression sharpened. Streen could easily be taken for a doddering old fool, but he clearly was perceptive. Dismissing him would be doing him a disservice. What do you mean? Streen chuckled. You don't like Gantoris? And it doesn't take Jedi skills to figure that out. No, I guess it doesn't. But he doesn't like you much either. Streen sat back, leaning over his elbows and forearms. Remember that exercise today? With Gantoris putting rocks in orbit? The same. You shouldn't be discouraged. When Master Luke and Gantoris came to Bespin to find me, they gave me a practical demonstration of how the Force can be used. Gantoris learned to push, with his mind, to make something move a ways away. My head came up. I see. Gantoris already knew how to use the Force to manipulate matter, which is why he excelled at the exercise. Luke didn't call him on this advantage, when Gantoris started in on me. He could have had 1,000 reasons for not doing that, not the least of which could have been to let Gantoris' words fuel my competitive sense. I didn't know if that was Luke's goal, or if what had happened would accomplish that goal, but knowing Gantoris wasn't above taking advantage of an opportunity was another data point I willingly logged. Regardless, even that information didn't bring me any closer to feeling the Force. Can I ask you a question, Streen? You just did, but I'll give you another. Thanks. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. What does the Force feel like to you? Feels like 10 kilos of life in a 5-kilo box. His voice gained in strength and lightened in tone. I can only feel a trickle now, like dust motes floating in a sunbeam, one by one, just moving through me. But it's just so right there's no describing it. It tickles a bit, feels like a first kiss, or the jolt you feel when the flux in Sabacc just makes your hand better than what you were already betting. Sabacc, the card game prominently featured in the film Star Wars. Wait, the film's called Solo. You may have heard of it. Solo, a Star Wars story. See, that existed in 97 when this came out. They just borrowed it from this. That's kind of fun. Expanded Universe isn't dead yet. I wanted to quip that I'd had dates like that, but the pure wonderment in his voice could have made the joke sound bitter. Wow. What's it feel like for you? I shook my head. Don't know. I'm not feeling it. I think the Force in me is strong enough to let me do little things, but I've not felt what you describe. Nothing even close. You will. I hope so. You will. Streen's voice sank back into his lower tone. Let me ask you a question. Fair trade. Master Skywalker's talked to us a lot about the dark side and how it's selfish and evil and cruel. Right? Okay, now you remember them Robics I mentioned? How I could never teach one a trick? Well, there was this one time. There was one that seemed to be smarter than the others. Just a bit. Not a whole lot, but a bit. And I thought he had real promise. So I tried to teach him to unfurl one wing, then the other one, and hop up and down in time with the tune I was whistling. I just wanted to see him dance. A little. Just a little. The loneliness in Streen's voice started to squeeze my heart. I'm with you. Now I thought, maybe, somehow, I don't know how, that if I could just convince him to do it once and reward him, he'd do it more. I was getting real frustrated and even angry, and I guess I used the Force to make him do the dance to the music, just once. And I didn't hurt him, and I gave him food and all. Streen's voice died amid the cacophony of Cinteral howls. Was I using the dark side? Was I doing evil? I'm not sure that's a question I can answer. Give it a try. I nodded and sighed heavily, watching my breath congeal into a cloud of white vapor. In an absolute sense, based on what Master Skywalker has told us, yes, you might have brushed up against the dark side. In a very real sense, though, what you did was selfish, but so minor, that on a scale of 1 to destroying Alderaan, it doesn't even rate a decimal point. The older man's nodding silhouette eclipsed stars. And where would you rate your fabrications about your past? What? I've been told you're from a Corellian Jedi family, and that you fought with the rebellion. That's all true. But that pride in you, That's the sort of pride built up from having done something. The story being told about you doesn't back it well. I can see that. I guess it's all a matter of perspective. I climb back to my feet again. Fact is, what we were before probably isn't that important. I could tell you all sorts of things about myself. Some you might believe, some you won't believe. Ultimately, though, not a one of them will help us become Jedi Knights. I'm proud of what I've done, but I'll be more proud to be a Jedi. Streen laughed a bit. So you're not lying. You're just not telling the whole truth because it won't mean much right now. I guess that's about it, yes. I can live with that. Streen hauled himself up to his feet and pointed to the turbo lift. Well, we might as well show the others we're smart enough to head in when it gets cold. Wouldn't do to have Jedi Knights seen as that stupid, would it? I asked as I fell in step with him. Nope. Wouldn't do at all. Over the next several days, we rotated through a series of exercises that underscored my inability to feel the Force. Other students had difficulties with various aspects of what I came to call pushing. Whether I was supposed to send something away, bring it near, raise it, lower it, move it at a distance, or up close, I proved hideously inept at it. Whereas Luke used the aphorism, size matters not, to encourage others to forget their doubts, with me, it became praised for even the least little twitch of a rock. The fact was, however, that I couldn't make a ripple in a cup of water. And while my ability to sense foes and what they were planning to do got better, I still didn't feel the Force entering me from outside. My progression in defensive areas came from opening up more of the Force within me, but that opening seemed to come as part of my instinctual desire for self-preservation, and I was blocked by my internal desire for preservation of self. Something had to give, and I thought I saw a way to make it give. Luke had arranged us in a circle around a huge boulder buried halfway into the ground. He nodded toward it. You have all been told repeatedly that size does not matter. This is true. I so badly wanted to say it's about the motion of the ocean. This is true. However, this does not mean all tasks will be simple. This rock, for all we know, is really just the top of a long plinth. We don't know how big it is. Moving it may not only take a titanic effort, but a sustained effort. With the Force flowing through you, you will be able to move it. If the Force is not flowing, the task will not be completed. It's funny that he talked about the tip. That's like a tip of a rock. It could be more underneath, like, I don't know, the tip of an iceberg, and then he uses the word Titanic in the same paragraph. Who are you trying to kid? He looked at each and every one of us openly. Who would be the first to try? Cantoris took a step forward. Master, I would. Master, if you please. I bowed my head toward him. I would be the first to do. Cantoris sneered in my direction. You? You will do nothing. Luke looked at me. Do you think you're ready? I shrugged. I believe I must do this. Perhaps in focusing on small things, I've closed myself down to the Force. To feel it, I must open myself to something more grand. I looked around the circle, making eye contact with everyone. I must move this rock, and therefore I will move it. This I believe. I was counting heavily on the internal pressures of not wanting to fail. I accepted that failure was possible, and was willing to live with the consequences of failure, which meant my attempt would not be frenzied or full of the negative emotions that heralded the dark side. I would just put my honest, best effort forward. I would do all the things I'd been taught to do, and I would succeed. The Jedi Master nodded. It is yours to do, then. Closing my eyes, I set myself and drew in a deep breath. Exhaling it slowly, I let my senses expand to touch Tion and Streen on either side of me. Then, my consciousness leaped, link by link, until I knew where everyone was in the circle. From there, I began to work inward, and as I did so, I began to feel the first faint tingles of energy. It felt almost like an ion bolt hitting close by, and it made the hair on my arm stand up. I didn't push, I didn't race after it, but spread myself out to let it come to me. As I made myself receptive, as I caught more of the Force the way the solar sail catches sunlight, my sense of the world became more complete. The blackness before my eyes did not lighten or brighten, but I found structures there, and things. Spots that moved were insects, lines that crawled beneath the dirt were worms. I traced bushes and grasses from leaf tip to root. If it was alive, I could feel it, and what I felt outside, I could also feel inside. The way Luke had molded his thoughts to mine to probe me about Mirax's absence came back to me in a rush. I looked at the currents of the Force inside me, and the currents swirling about outside. Little by little, slowly modifying a thought here, calming a doubt there, setting aside fear and encouraging hope, I changed how the Force flowed within me. I let it erode from the inside out, all the walls isolating me from the universal torrent of Force energy. With the first breach in my defenses, the Force slammed into me like a high-pressure fluid jetting through a pinpoint gap in a pipe. It filled me up in an instant, and I imagined it leaking from my eyes, nose, and mouth. I wanted to shout and dance with joy, because it was everything Streen had described. It was what I felt when Mirax first said she loved me. It was the scent of the perfume my mother wore, and the warm laugh my father used to have when he was proud of me. It was the hearty slap on the back from Wedge after a mission, and even a touch of Whistler's triumphant serenades. It was everything that was good and right and positive and alive, and it was waiting for me to bend it to my will. Newly empowered, I reached out for the stone. In a heartbeat, I plumbed its depths. I knew its size and mass. I knew its contours and its weaknesses. I knew I could shape the Force into a hammer and shatter it. But that was not the task at hand. My task was to move it, to rip it from the ground, to raise it up so all could see what I had done. I poured the Force into my effort. At first I felt resistance, but I expected that. The stone had been firmly stuck in the ground for years. I tugged at it, and could see it rocking back and forth. Small pebbles cascaded off of it, bouncing down into the grasses at its base. I worried it like a loose tooth, then I prepared to pull it. I gritted my teeth against the effort. I felt the stone shift. Before my mind's eye, I saw it quiver and shake. Slowly at first, it began to move upward. A micron here, a millimeter there, then a centimeter, then 2. And 4 and 6 and 20. Rich brown loam fell from it as the lower half of the stone began to rise above the surface. Faster it moved now, slowed only by the occasional clumsy bump against the side of the hole it had inhabited. My control was not yet fine, but I knew it would get better, so I pushed on, working on lifting it higher. The stone came fully clear of the ground, but that was not enough for me. I could feel the Force pulsing into me, full and insistent. I channeled it back out through my mind and made the rock's descent smooth. I lifted it up so high that when I opened my eyes, I knew I would be able to see beneath it and find Master Luke across the circle from me. I would lift it so high, in fact, that not even Gantoris could deny what I had done. Finally, I had success. The stone hung in the air better than 2 meters above the ground. I held it there and redoubled my effort to quell the list in it. I wanted it as firmly embedded in the Force and air as it had been on the ground. When it stopped moving, I smiled and opened my eyes. The rock remained in the ground. I stared at it and tried to remember if I had heard it crash back down into the ground. I couldn't remember such a sound, nor could I remember feeling the shockwave that would have resulted from a crash landing. I glanced up at where the rock should have been, then back down. I couldn't believe it had not moved, because I knew I had felt the Force, and I knew the rock had flown. Then I noticed that all the others, every single one of them, were looking at the spot in the air where I had seen the rock floating. Tion and Streen wore open expressions of wonderment. Cam wore the smirk with which he rewarded good efforts. Gantoris looked as if he'd seen a ghost, and the others just looked amazed. Across from me, Luke shook his head, then passed a hand over his eyes. He glanced back at the spot in the air where the rock should have been. Then his gaze flicked toward where it really lay. He looked around at the other students, then gently passed a hand through the air, causing them to blink and rub their eyes. Gantoris looked at the rock and then accusingly at me. What did you do? What Kieran did was feel the Force. The Jedi Master nodded to me, then advanced and rested a hand on Gantoris' shoulder. He opened the pathway to his future. What he did or did not do here should not concern you. Instead, be happy knowing yet another of you is past the first hurdle on the road to becoming a Jedi Knight. Well, that's for the end, I guess. Pretty good end of a chapter, though. That chapter's sweet. I definitely remember that from the first time I read this. That was such a description for him lifting the rock, and then turns out it didn't really. I think that's a clever twist. He tricked them all. Also really like the little conversation that Corran had with Streen. Gives you a little bit more info on Streen. And again, we get all this from Corran about how just he analyzes every little detail about everything, and he overthinks everything, and he's so critical of himself. And it's clear that that's what's blocking his Force use, I think. But anyway, short little chapter, very eventful for me. I actually, that's a really fun one. One of my favorites yet, for sure. Anyway, I thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed that one. And I will definitely be back next week with the next one. Thanks for listening. May the Force